The question most people ask or wondering when starting a business, they ask, what business should I start? How do I start a business? When you start a business, one of the most important things is having an original idea and being first in your niche. And the reason that is because usually who's ever first to that niche usually dictates what it is about. Kind of like how, think about 100 years ago, when Band-Aids first got into the sort of bandage adhesive niche, they became the primary user of that thing. In fact, so much so to the point that people think Band-Aid is the name of the product, whereas Band-Aid is just the name of the brand. And so everyone calls it that. So you see how they have dictated that entire market by people literally call other people's products Band-Aids despite not being it. Band-Aid is a brand name. It's not the name of the actual product. Same when people call it saran wrap or like things like that. You know, they dictate the niche. Or Oreos, there's obviously other competitors, but no one will compare it to the original. Now, the same thing applies to any business. When you're getting it, you want to be the first. You want to be original or new so that you can dictate the niche and be at the top. But how do you do that in a world where it seems like everything has already been created? There's so many businesses. Some people say every niche is oversaturated. You can't do anything new. And to answer that question, we are basically going to be asking, how do we create something new? That's the question. How do you create something new? How do you go from 0 to 1? That is what's called innovation. When you create a business, you have one of two options. You can either improve on someone else's idea, or you can create something new yourself. To improve on someone else's idea is to go from 1 to 2, make things better. But for going to 0 from 1 is to create something out of nothing. So how do we do that? How do we create something? How do we create something new is essentially the question we're asking. And to create something new would be to create a new business. Well, the answer lies in the question. And the question you're asking is, what new business should I make? And most people say that, all of them are created. But the reason that's wrong is because that disagrees with a fundamental truth, and is that we do not live in a perfect world. You see, to say that every business has been created, or there's no ideas left for a business, say I can't start a business because they're saturated or there's nothing new, would imply that there's nothing new to learn or improve upon in the world. And that's just simply not true. We don't live in a perfect world. And so the day that we live in a perfect world, that becomes an acceptable excuse. But since we don't, because we don't live in a perfect world, there are still problems out there. Problems that need to be solved. And as you know, that being an entrepreneur or a business owner is simply about solving people's problems. So what you need to do is ask yourself, what problems are there in the world that I would like to solve? Or what problems are there in the world that no one is solving that you could potentially take advantage of? You could solve that problem. For instance, people thought that way back in the 1990s, that there's nothing to solve. Well, what about the use of AirPods? What if you don't want big, clunky headphones? Someone was like, I don't want those big, clunky headphones. I want headphones. So they made the small headphones. But then even more than that, well, what if I want headphones but without the cord? That's a problem, and someone solved it by creating AirPods. So you see how it can be very common for most people to think that there are no good ideas left. There's no business to create, but you simply need to open your mind to larger possibilities. And since you are a problem solver first and foremost, as someone who's creating a business, then you begin to wonder, what businesses out there that are not being solved? What is being left on the table? Because if there's a problem, that is money on the table that you could be collecting by solving the person's problem. Now, the way you go about it is that there are specific types of problems to solve. So let's say you, of course, need to niche down, where if you are a fitness influencer, you want to stay in your niche. Or if you're a creator of technology, you want to stay in that niche. And then go inside the niche. So first of all, find out what your niche is. Your niche should be whatever it is that you are obsessed with. Whatever is something that just speaks to you from the heart. And it needs to be something that is a core tenet of your belief. For instance, for me, I love fitness so much. I love running, I love staying in shape and doing all that stuff. And so I'm constantly looking at fitness material, watching YouTube videos, watching things like that. And so I would be in the fitness niche because that is my hobby, that is my life. My life revolves around fitness. And so that would be my niche. Yours may be something different. Maybe you're really into basketball. Maybe you're really into sewing or computer coding. And so you get to your niche. Then because you're in your niche, because you're living in it, let's say your niche is cooking. You are a chef, so you're going to talk to other chefs. You're going to be around chefs all the time. And so you'll naturally just hear more of their problems, more of their wants, more of their needs. And because you hear about the problems, like, oh, like what if a chef was like, oh, I cut pasta a certain way, but it's too much to do by hand. Well, the person who invented the pasta cutter, like there's a machine that you can feed dough into it and it creates pasta. The person who did that was around chefs enough to know that cutting pasta by hand was so exhausting that there's an opportunity there because it is a problem. They solve someone else's problem. So you need to start getting into that mindset of what's a problem that I can solve, and more specifically, what's a problem that I want to solve for other people in order to create a good business. That is how you create new things because, like I said, it can be very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that everyone has done all the great things. All of the greats have achieved, everyone has discovered, people have already trailblazed and found all there is to be found in this world. But that's simply not true. There are always more new things because we do not live in a perfect society. We don't live in a perfect world, which means naturally there are problems out there. Maybe it's with fishing. Maybe it's with there's not a perfect way to sew, so they created the sewing machine. But maybe you could take it even further by creating something new. Whether you are improving on someone else's design or creating something new, it requires you taking a look at the world. Ask yourself, what problems does it need to be solved? What problems do I want to solve for it? And realistically, even people who just have normal jobs do this too. People who love taking care of other people or being doctors, they would become a doctor because they think the world doesn't have enough healers or medics. Maybe someone thinks there's not enough law and order, so they become a cop. But you, as a business owner, can actually affect and change the world simply by asking people what are their problems and how to solve them. So that is how you create something new. This is how exactly you create a new idea, how you create new business, and you help people on a personal level.